No matter what you think of this movie, I got to see Lucy Liu back on the big screen where she belongs, and that alone was worth the price of admission. Hi, I'm LadyJenevia, your resident hype girl of the 2000s Charlie's Angels films, and today's video is a review of the new DCEU film Shazam! Fury of the Gods. The first section will be a few spoiler-free thoughts, and then we will talk about things in more detail with all of the spoilers.
I would die for her. I would kill for her. Either way, what bliss?
I enjoyed the first Shazam film, which is why I was looking forward to this sequel being released more than I was in the lead up to the first film. Plus, adding these iconic, heavy-hitting women, Lucy Liu and Helen Mirren, as villains, that was what I wanted to see. While I did have fun watching them be baddies, one thing I would have liked to see more of for them is a bit more emotional introspection for their characters and the relationships that they have with one another. If we compare it to the first film, Mark Strong's performance is more or less exactly what you would expect to see for a villain in a big superhero blockbuster, but the inclusion of the opening flashback for him where you see him as a child and the mistreatment he experienced by his family, it really gave a deeper understanding of who this person was as a character, and it created an interesting parallel between hero and villain of Billy Batson finding love and acceptance from his newfound family in a way that Dr. Sivana never received from his family. Despite my interest in seeing an even deeper exploration of the villains in Shazam 2, I did like that we had a similar parallel where both the hero team and the villain team were experiencing friction within their family dynamics, but they ultimately varied in how they do or do not work through those differences. One of the things that I love about this film that makes it stand out compared to the highly saturated onslaught of superhero media being released nowadays was the horror imagery. David Sandberg is first and foremost a horror director, and you can really feel that with the way certain action sequences played out, the design of certain fantasy creatures. I know that David wants to get back to his horror roots, so I'll be interested to see what he does with his next release. In general, watching Shazam! Fury of the Gods really felt like experiencing the nicer parts of my childhood again. It made me feel like I was reliving a more simple time when I was not hypercritical of art and prone to diving deep into media analysis. The only politically or ideologically questionable thing that I found in this movie was that I wanted them to remove the fact that these children were playing military video games. We do not need to indoctrinate children into supporting the military-industrial complex. Thank you very much. But in general, though, there's something very sentimental about not only this story of a group of kids being the heroes, but the sense of adventure and wonder of the more fantastical elements, as well as this warm quality to how they ultimately affirm their found family unit by the time the credits roll. Too many superhero films feel like they are action movies with all the grit and grime watered down so that they can be appropriate for children to come watch for the sake of corporate profits. But with Shazam 2, it actually feels like the story has always been designed to be that 80s or 90s-esque family-friendly adventure film that's full of heart. I think of films like Hook or Jumanji, but perhaps that's just my personal nostalgia for Robin Williams that is causing me to pull out those references. Billy is shown to be wearing a Goonies shirt, and maybe that's another reference that is an appropriate comparison, though it's not the one that I thought of when watching the film because I did not grow up watching the Goonies as a child. I had a couple of issues though with the film's pacing, but I'm not going to elaborate a whole lot on that because I think that people who spend too high a percentage of their video review runtime or article word count nitpicking a film's pacing are just ultimately being needlessly pedantic. It's never the most interesting part of feedback or analysis of a work of fiction. Overall, though, I enjoyed the viewing experience as a follow-up to the first Shazam film, and if I take these two films and put them together as a cute little contained story, it works really well for me. I don't really know how I feel about the idea of a third Shazam film because even though I do like a lot of these characters and performers, I'm not fond of the general state of things going on above those people's heads. This is probably when I should give a spoiler warning. So now let's get into the specifics. That mid-credit scene was awful. How you could take me from the emotional high of the joyous surprise of hearing an Elvis song in the credits to plummeting off a cliff with that No. Why am I being forced to watch these characters that I don't care about at all? I signed up for a Shazam film with a Shazamily and some fabulous feminine villains, not to see these uninteresting people trying to recruit a child into your cop gang. I don't want it, I didn't ask for it, and I will not be tuning in. Ugh. When it comes to my channel, I haven't really acknowledged the total disarray that the DCEU now finds itself in because I kept waiting for the dust to settle, and it never has. There are too many people to call out by name, but just in general, there are a lot of executives at various stages of the DCEU being run whose misconduct and total inability to get this house in order, it has ultimately sucked a lot of joy out of the experience of being a DCEU fan. I do want to see this final year of DCEU films. We've still got The Flash, Blue Beetle, and Aquaman 2, but after that, I have no interest in unquestioningly committing myself to whatever revamp is being rolled out. Whatever DC films I watch after 2023 during their cinematic run will be decided on a case-by-case basis. It's the same way that as a general tendency, I do not watch MCU films, but I did go and see Sam Raimi's return because Sam Raimi, the legendary director that he is, was in director's jail for a good decade, so I wanted to see what was going to happen once they opened up the doors and let him out. But getting back to Shazam! Fury of the Gods, I found it quite an interesting change that they made the film so high octane, and right from the jump, we see the film opening with Lucy and Helen unleashing total chaos and mayhem, which was admittedly terrific fun to watch. And from there, a good amount of the runtime had that same level of very high energy. I really enjoyed the quieter moments that were more intimate for the characters. I got really emotional seeing that exchange between Billy and his mother when he finally accepted her as his mother. I just wish we could have had a little bit more time in that space. I think I've probably been spoiled by watching Baz Luhrmann's Elvis and James Cameron's Avatar: The Way of Water so many times. They have longer run times, and as such, there's a lot more room to dig into things that would have probably been left on the cutting room floor if you had a big committee bossing you around and forcing you to adhere to a shorter run time closer to 2 hours. I knew that Lotta, David Sandberg's wife and professional collaborator, was going to have a cameo because I think I saw her say on social media that she would be appearing in this film, even though she played another character who died in the first Shazam film. But what I was pleasantly surprised by was the fact that David Sandberg also had a cameo. Now, if you missed it, he gets snatched up by one of the monsters, and just knowing how horror is his passion, I found it to be a really fun thing to see him quite literally throw himself into the horror and mayhem of his movie. There were the monsters, but also that splinter under the fingernail. David, you need to pay for me to get therapy or a soothing sound machine so I can have some assistance in my coping mechanisms after that image got burned into my brain. I know the sequence where Billy is dreaming of Wonder Woman and then the wizard comes to visit him and his head appears on her body. It looks a bit funny, but I will just say that Djimon Hounsou in that wig, it was working for me. He looked fabulous. I have no notes. How were any of you going to expect me to speak ill of that man when he was in the cinematic classic Beauty Shop? I don't want to hear it. Maybe he just wanted to turn in a fabulous wig after Kevin Bacon got to be a silly villain in that wig.
Oh my god, this is crazy.
I really enjoyed seeing the kids sleuth together and doing all this research in the magical library. Also, just in general, that location was really fun to see, and if I had any optimism left about the future of the DCEU, I would have hoped that we could see more scenes in future Shazam films in that library and more fun with Steve the pen. Now, I did not expect to form any type of attachment to a pen when sitting down to watch this film for the first time, but Steve being a shady little troublemaker by not editing down people's words when writing letters for them, it was a really good comedic bit, and I enjoyed watching it. Freddie and Anne were also cute together. The chemistry was giving what it needed to give considering that these characters are children, but I also loved that their interactions were a way to facilitate the wizard rolling his eyes at them in response. I really felt that. That central theme of everyone can be worthy really worked for me because of the fact that this film so clearly was a family film. If this was a story that had been more focused on trying to talk to adults and not also children, that theme could have felt a bit too simple and on the nose, but ultimately the story and characters felt like they had enough genuine heart to make me buy into that message. The Skittles thing was an interesting development. On the one hand, if I wanted to be snippy, I could complain about product placement and processed sugar, but considering how much State Department money tends to fund these big IP action blockbusters in exchange for them pumping out propaganda, I will happily take junk food product placement as the lesser evil. No hesitation in that choice either. But I actually liked that there were some really good elements to the inclusion of this product placement. If they needed to do product placement, it seemed like a good amount of thought went into making it fit into the larger narrative and message that was already in place. In the process, you were encouraging children to be resourceful, to think about problem solving, and you were also nurturing children to have empathy for animals. As an Avatar: The Way of Water fan, how can I be upset about that? That only leaves a couple of final points to address. For one, the Gal cameo. I know that her being in the movie got spoiled by the marketing, but actually seeing it play out with the full context of the story and everything that led up to that moment, I really liked it. As someone who is saddened by the idea of not getting to see her and Patty Jenkins do a Wonder Woman 3, which was so clearly set up to have Linda Carter appear in more than a cameo role, and you will not convince me otherwise, there was this unexpected emotional catharsis from getting to see her back and in the suit and using her power for good to help save a hero who was willing to sacrifice himself to save the lives of others. It's a nice little parallel to the Justice League resurrecting Superman. And considering how grandiose a lot of Wonder Woman's stories and appearances have been, I liked the change of scenery, the fact that she was existing in a more localized story. Now, I already talked about the mid-credit scene.
Boo, tomato, 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 I'm throwing tomatoes.
And I need to reiterate, the use of Elvis Presley's A Little Less Conversation, the smile I had on my face was enormous before that mid-credit scene killed the vibe. But finally, the post-credit scene. I cannot hide my bias when it comes to Mark Strong. That man delivered the famous Archie slap, and what's really fun about performers like him, as well as Helen Mirren and even Michael Shannon, to be fair, is that I never once get the impression that they're phoning it in, even when they're appearing in these populist blockbusters instead of an award show bait drama. If you bring Mark Strong back, but with a full presence in a future narrative, I can't deny that I will be curious. I don't know what happened to not make him the main villain with the worm for this sequel, though I can't exactly say that I'm complaining since Lucy and Helen were so fabulous and fun to watch. But if you're going to keep teasing this story, it feels like a bit of a shame to not follow through on it. However, given the new leadership in charge, I think a lot of new DCEU films are at serious risk of deeply indulging in propaganda. So if you try to serve me some propaganda story and use Mark Strong to try to bait me into contributing to the box office, I won't do it.
I really hope I didn't just accidentally predict that.
The only way I would get involved in any of that mess is if you were to offer me the chance to do the film's junket, an offer that I would probably have to accept solely for the purpose of speaking to Mark Strong himself and letting him know that even after all these years, I would happily go see the real rock and rolla if just somebody would get off of their rear and fund it, because I want to see Mark Strong unleashing the famous Archie slap once more. So those are some of my thoughts on Shazam: Fury of the Gods. Thank you for watching. I am currently in the process of trying to set up a fun new interview, so stay tuned for that, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.